From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Open Line.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Open Line. Glad you're with us tonight. We have an important conversation, really a panel tonight, talking about evictions. What does this moratorium on evictions really mean for tenants and for landlords? It's been in effect for a while. When will it end? What will happen when it ends? We're really going to delve into some of these very interesting issues that impact a lot of people who rent and landlords. And we have, as I said, a panel. So we're going to have 3 people on for the first part of the show, then a new group of people will come on for the second half of the show. Let me introduce via Zoom our first group of panelists. We have Deborah Taylor Tate. She's the director of the Tennessee Supreme Court Administrative Office of the Court's former FCC commissioner. So, Deborah, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Ben.
And we have Larry Bridge-Smith. He's the chair of the Alternative Dispute Resolution Commission and an adjunct professor of law at Vanderbilt Law School. And I'll just go ahead and also introduce Ann Louise Worthland. She's the assistant director and director of Access to Justice at the Tennessee Supreme Court Administrative Office of the Court. So thank all of you for being here. And Deborah, yes, I'll start with you. You helped set this up. Why is this an important time to have this conversation?
Well, Ben, just like you, our world changed last March, and certainly for all of your viewers as well, and what people don't really realize, and for the court system as well. And so not only has Nashville been dealing with the pandemic, but we've had tornadoes, floods, and then even the really sad Christmas Day bombing. So when I first realized last fall that this moratorium, which you just spoke about, that prevented eviction cases from moving forward in the court system would be lifted, at that point in time, it was going to be lifted, sadly, on New Year's Eve night, December 31st. I said, let's pull together a lot of people in this arena, and let's sit down and talk about resources, and let's have an eviction summit, which we did October 1st. What I called it was a Prevent Eviction Summit, because many of the resources that you're going to hear about tonight are actually an outgrowth of that summit. We wanted to hopefully prevent evictions through rental assistance, legal, social services on the front end, rather than having families put out on the street. And so while courts were open for emergency type hearings, for constitutionally required matters to be heard, many hearings were absolutely paused, put on hold, and literally evictions were one of those. So during the Trump administration, there was a CDC moratorium. Then our Supreme Court also had a moratorium specifically for eviction cases here in Tennessee. All of those were going to be lifted. Once the Biden administration came in, the CDC issued another moratorium. However, you talk about confusing, the Western U.S. Federal District Court has now lifted the ban on all of West Tennessee, while the moratorium is still in effect in Middle and East Tennessee. So just like we did at the Eviction Summit, we're trying to get as many resources out to people as we can.
Wow. So that was going to be my question. When will this moratorium end? And I frankly didn't know that. You're saying it's not even uniform across the state. It's already ended in one part of the state, and in other parts of the state it has not ended yet.
Right, precisely. And so that's why we really, and thank you so much to you and to Channel 5 and Open Line for allowing us to come on, talk, answer questions, and provide you a lot of the resources that we have. You mentioned that Ann Louise is the head of something called Access to Justice. This is part of our whole month called Help for TN. It used to just be a day of activities. Now it's an entire month. And part of this will focus on evictions. Let me also say, Ben, that the law also protects landlords. We are not trying to say that this will not force people to have to pay their rent, because it will. But there is also, through the CARES Act and other funding, a lot of rental assistance that is now available for people who have either fallen behind or are having problems right now. Okay. So there are a lot of people that can use these resources.
Absolutely, and we'll get into that. And Larry, I want to ask you, you said as we came on, you're concerned about what is to come. You're concerned as this ends, what's coming next. And so let me re-ask that of you. What do you mean by that? And again, state, if you don't mind, when will this moratorium end for Middle and East Tennessee? So it's already ended in West Tennessee. What about for the rest of the state? When does this moratorium on evictions end?
Well, as the director said, there are a number of layers to that question. And let me respond to it by simply saying that, like all difficult questions, it takes a village of multidisciplinary experts to begin to address that. And that's why this is a tsunami as we see it. Because when the landlords and the tenants are unable to come to an agreement over what is owed legitimately and resolve that, then you have a claim that will find its way to the courts. And the tsunami is really multifaceted because, as the director said, when COVID came, courts shut down, basically. And so they're building a backlog of cases that they haven't been able to get to. Now add to that this upcoming moratorium end, and you can begin to define the tsunami of new cases to add to the backlog. So at the Alternative Dispute Resolution Commission, where I chair for the Supreme Court, that's where the mediation community resides. And so we saw this coming back in August, not knowing what it would result in terms of evictions. So we surveyed the state judges. We asked them, do you see that there's a backlog growing? Now, this is August of last year, and more than half of them said yes. And then of those, we asked, would you welcome mediation as a means of addressing these? And more than half of them said yes. So that was the beginning of a plan to bring mediation into these backlogs, and coinciding with this incredible eviction issue that we're facing and the great degree to which Tennesseans from stem to stern, landlords, tenants, are all going to get caught in the crossfire.
And Ann Louise Worthland, as you know, the Assistant Director and Director of Access to Justice, how does this, what's your point of view on this? And what do you want people to know?
Well, I and the Access to Justice Commission that I provide counsel to, we want people to know where to turn when they are in crisis, when this is happening. And so Help for TN Month, which used to be Day, really focuses on making the public aware of legal aid services, civil legal services, wraparound services, where they can go to get things like SNAP food benefits, rental assistance now. And Help for TN Month we're in our 5th year of doing it, and we change every year just depending on what is happening in Tennessee. And so there are a few resources that are available for anyone across the state that I'm happy to share now. We also provided those, but the best one, if you can't remember anything else, is help4tn.org. It is a website that you can find resources on evictions, obviously, for landlords and tenants. As we said, we're not just focusing on tenants. We know that there are smaller landlords and other landlords that are hurting right now as well. And that will funnel people towards where they can get free legal advice over the phone, or they can try to get free legal advice through an attorney via email. It also will refer them to their local legal aid office, and we're going to hear from someone from the legal aid that in Middle Tennessee, but just where to go. And then also people like our faith leaders, and other people who are on the front lines, where they can send people and they're members of their community that are also in crisis.
Do you all, and I'll ask any of you this, do you have any idea how many people have said that they can't pay their rent and they're living in their apartment or in their rental home, and they haven't paid their rent for some period of months? I mean, do we have any numbers on this, or is it just guesses? We feel like there's a lot. And who wants to take that?
I'll just say that, no, we don't have an exact figure. We believe it to be thousands of Tennesseans that could be subject to the process. And that's another thing, Ben, that it's just a confusing process. Anytime that you get involved in the court system, there are a lot of rules and timelines, which are good because they protect both sides of both of the people who are involved in a dispute. As Larry said, the great thing about mediation is people are doing this outside of the court process, where hopefully you have more control. Perhaps it's not quite as intimidating. You don't have to take off from work and go downtown. There's so many reasons that mediation can really help, especially in a situation like evictions.
Let's say I am a tenant, and let's say I've paid all the way up, but I'm struggling now, and I'm living in the part of the state where this moratorium is still in effect. So I've paid all the way up until now, but I'm struggling now. Larry, what does that person need to do?
Well, that's part of the backlog plan that we came up with, and we had the great support of the Supreme Court. They were very interested in how we can help address that. And the mediators across the state, all approved by and listed as a Rule 31 mediator under Supreme Court rules, many have volunteered their services for free. And so the plan is to utilize the community mediation centers located in Knoxville, Nashville, and Memphis, and they will then coordinate with the other community mediation centers in their region. You reach out to a community mediation center, whether you're a landlord or a tenant, and all of the details of those numbers and access are being provided so that you'll have those contact places. But reaching out to the community mediation center, who you'll hear from in a little bit, is going to be the way in which to inaugurate, to institute this process, hopefully to avoid going to court in the first place.
That's kind of your goal here, right? Mediation, I mean, let's stay out of the courts. You expect tons coming in the courts, but let's try and prevent that.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And Annalise, let me ask you. So let's say I'm a tenant and I haven't paid for several months. I've done everything right. I think there's a form you're supposed to fill out. My landlord's probably a little frustrated with me, but they can't evict me. It's gone on for 3 or 4 months. This moratorium ends. What should I do? What should that person do?
2 things. One, helpfortn.org, because you could get connected to an attorney that could give you some free advice that way. But then depending on where you live in the state, for most counties, the Tennessee Housing Development Agency is where people can access information about rental assistance and specifically funding on rental assistance. Now, 4 counties, Davidson, Rutherford, Shelby, and Knox are administering their own programs, and we've provided that information, but you can also get it on the Tennessee Housing Development Agency site of what that agency, where that would be, and how you would access those funds. So that would be my first 2 recommendations, would be to helpfortn.org, and then go to Tennessee Housing Development Agency so you can see how you access that rental assistance program in your county.
Because you think it's a good idea to try and access rental assistance funds. It's important to remember that just because you haven't paid rent, you still owe rent. Isn't that right?
Yes. Absolutely. And Ben, I was just going to add that there's a myriad of other traumatic things that happen to families. If you lost your job during the COVID crisis, I mean, maybe you need transportation funding, maybe you need childcare or groceries. All of those can be accessed on the THDA website. And again, we've provided all that so that your viewers can just look on your website and find that.
Okay, all right, that kind of sets the table. We're going to take a break. We'll start taking calls. And at the bottom of the hour, after the first part of this, we're going to bring in a new group of panelists. So this is a good chance to call in with any questions you have about this moratorium on evictions in Tennessee. So we'll take a break. Be back right after this.